Hey guys, I'm your host, Martin Perdomo, and this is your ultimate guide to understanding what it truly means to be wealthy AF. And today I'm joined by Zack Blakeney. And Zack empowers men to quit porn for good and rise to the highest version of themselves. He experienced 16 years of pornography addiction from the time he was 14 to 30, along with 10 years of drug addiction, and ended in a divorce. After working with hundreds of CEOs, founders, and C-suite executives in mastering the art of inner transformation, he realized his highest calling is to help millions of men suffering from porn use and reform the addiction recovery space. And today we're going to be talking about a very important topic, and it's on porn. What is porn addiction? We're going to talk about porn addiction today. That it's as I was preparing for this, Zack, I found out a lot of information. So first and foremost, sir, thank you for coming on the show, being so gracious with your time and educating us on this space. So I'm gonna go right into it, brother. What is porn addiction?
Well, the way I would classify an addiction is it's a habit that has detrimental effects or damaging effects on yourself and those around you. So if you take that as a premise of addiction, you can attach that to really any habit, right? Any behavior. So porn has to do with being habitually addicted in this way to pornography. Mm-hmm. And pornography is, in my experience, research, and opinion, the worst form of addiction that anybody can experience. Reason being, one, our sexual energy is sacred, and it's also our life force energy. It is creative energy. So that when we are continually draining our energy towards a computer screen and imagery, we don't actually have the energy, the drive, the will to go after our dreams in our lives, right? The grandest and most unreasonable vision that you have for yourself. Mm-hmm. This being the Wealthy AF podcast, right? So, and I know, in my opinion, and probably yours, that wealth is not just money.
100%.
To live a wealthy life, it's very difficult to do when you're in the grips of addiction, especially porn addiction.
That's why you're here.
Secondly, the availability and the normalization of porn use. If I want to go buy drugs or even alcohol, I have to find a dealer or go to a gas station, then buy it, then bring it back. There's an ordeal, I guess you can say, right? Some effort is put into it. But if I want to watch pornography, I can pick up my phone. I can watch it on the computer that I'm currently filming this with you on. The availability of it is everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then we have the emotional, which is really what the addiction is, and all addiction is. It's an addiction to an emotion or a state of being. It's an emotional roller coaster that pornography brings an individual through. So just to give you an idea, an overview of looking at this, typically porn is being used as a way to escape from stress, right? So you might be experiencing some sort of stress, which then creates cortisol and norepinephrine in your present moment, and then you want to escape that stress. This is a cheap way to start escaping. So dopamine is produced with the anticipation of watching pornography. So the escape is the escape into dopamine. And then you start to open up different tabs, different genres of whatever it is that an individual might like. And each tab that you're opening up, you're actually creating a dopamine response in your body as well. Then we get to the point where orgasm is achieved. Now, when you orgasm, the body is flooded not only with a massive amount of dopamine, but also oxytocin, where it creates a binding mechanism to pornography. Now, once you're done with that, most men and people, again, women also watch pornography, that do not like watching it will suddenly feel guilt, I did a bad thing, and shame, I am a bad person. And they bring that back into their present moment, and that compounds their stress and their anxiety in the present, and then they want to escape again. So this roller coaster of emotions at cause for the effects of watching porn and the availability of it is absolutely damaging our society and our ability to connect, to reproduce, to have deep and meaningful relationships. And when we look at the evolution of the porn industry coming from, the year 2000, which is when I was 14 and I started watching it, where we moved from AOL dial-up internet to broadband internet. Well, the high-speed internet was the birth of internet pornography because there was video pornography everywhere. I just watched a clip about the Joe Rogan podcast where he had a guest on and they were talking about sex robots and how sex robots have gotten so advanced now that they can integrate the AI and the user of the sex robot can have them do whatever they want. And they've come to the point where they're creating flesh that is so believable that literally it's like the movie Ex Machina. If anybody's ever seen that movie, it's coming back. So I can say this and then I'll throw some
That's
studies.
Scary, brother. That's just scary stuff, man. That's crazy. I got to look up that podcast. Dude, that's nuts, man.
It is, and here's some studies that validate it. Right now, 40% of men under 30 years old haven't had sex in the last year.
Why is that? I've heard that shit. Why is that, Zach?
Porn. We're talking about the amount of effort, the perceived amount of effort it takes to court a woman, and the perceived amount of effort it takes to watch pornography, and to get your sexual fix from something that literally takes no effort to do. So if you start to program yourself, let's go into conditioning, right? If you start to condition or program yourself to reach for pornography and then have the biochemical feedback of oxytocin, which binds you to pornography, to have a relationship with it, and that relationship is easy. The other side effects that come from porn use are things like social anxiety. So social anxiety is anxiety being socially and also talking to women. Now you're going to have even more anxiety talking to women because you start to see the conditioning of pornography starts to have you see women as an object and not as a human being. You start seeing women as a sex object. And when you see somebody as that and not as their human soul of what they already are, then you're going to be automatically disconnected because connection comes from the heart center. It comes from the soul. So these men are socially awkward. They're especially awkward with women. They most likely have gotten rejected by a woman because of being socially awkward, and that rejection has them go to what's easy.
So is that what women refer to as being a creepy guy? I'm curious because I hear, women say this stuff about men. Oh, he's creepy, right? He's creepy. Is that the energy? Is it that man that you're describing, that avatar that you're describing right now?
Yeah. There's typically staring, and they're staring because they can unconsciously stare at pornography all they want and it doesn't stare back. But then they've programmed themselves to stare at things that they find sexually attractive. So then you have men that start staring in a very creepy way at women. My girlfriend, Julia Renee, she's an IFBB wellness pro, and she has an incredible body. And she can be in the gym, and there are guys that are literally just staring at her. And
just
she can stare right back at them, and they'll keep staring. I mean, that's the type of conditioning that happens from this and totally unconscious. But it's a massive anchor when it comes to, again, stepping into the highest version of who you want to be.
I'd like for you to share your story with our listeners. How you came to this journey, from the age of 14 to 30. And then I want to share some stats with you, and I want to share a little bit of my experience. But I want to start with, how did you come to be this expert that is wanting to empower men on, the highest version of themselves by this calling? Tell us your story. How did you even know you was addicted to porn?
Yeah. So when I started when I was 14, I came from a place of curiosity, innocence. I had been told not to watch it with any sort of education behind it. And if you tell any human being not to do something, especially a child, they're going to be curious, and curiosity then creates desire to want to know. So that was me. So I was 14. I was, my family was well off enough that we had our own computer. I had my own private basement that I could go down and explore. So I did. Now, again, when I was 14 years old, I didn't know it was going to turn into a 16-year-old addiction. It started in that space. But then over time, obviously, I started to become, again, comfortable with the fact that if I wanted to, and I was definitely horny as a 14-year-old boy and all the way up into my 20s, right?
Did you become the creepy guy, dude?
No, I don't think I've ever been the creepy guy.
Okay.
Because I kept the creepy guy hidden from everybody else. And I'll tell you that's a little bit, that's not totally honest, because I do have things that happen from that. I'm not immune to the conditioning, But I was never somebody that would just like stare down women. I had a consciousness to me that was considerate of other people. I've always been considerate, right? So everybody has their own individual personality and how it distorts it. So I started dabbling when I was 14, and I would do it occasionally because I had my parents' supervision there at the time. And once I got into college is when it got worse, because then I had my own laptop, I had my own room, and that's really where I started to be unrestricted. And without the awareness of what it was doing to me, I started to dive into all sorts of different genres. If you want to go into porn, there's a jungle of different genres. And all of it is taking you way, way far away from, what sex actually is. And so then I started to explore these genres. And I would be in my room, masturbate to porn 3 times a day, but I was telling my roommates I was studying, right? And I was definitely too smart for my own good, because I skated with a bachelor's and a master's, with the top of my class. So it's like, it didn't really inhibit, my intelligence, so to speak, but there's a difference between intelligence and awareness. Mm-hmm. So the effects that I started to experience were something called porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So porn-induced erectile dysfunction is created when, what you're doing, brother, is you're starting to map your sexual attraction to visual imagery and scenes. That's not what sex is, right? Sex is a body and soul experience with another human being. But you start to create an attraction to this. Now, I like to use this example because just gives people an idea that you can map your sexual attraction to anything. In Auschwitz, in the Nazi camps, Nazi soldiers used to masturbate to gassing Jewish people. So they had mapped their sexual attraction to killing people in the gas chambers. So I just use this because it can literally, your sexual energy is whatever it's attached to. Whatever you attach it to, you can start to be aroused by that. In the porn industry, there are people that are aroused by hentai porn. There are also, I can't remember
what is that? What's hentai porn?
Hentai porn is literally anime porn in Japanese. And it's monsters. It's monster porn.
Monster porn. What do you mean by monster porn? Like the boogeyman, like a cartoon boogeyman monster porn?
No, it's in anime, monsters having sex with women.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Typically like tentacles and things like that. There are also conventions where people have not.
That's it, brother. That's some sick stuff, man.
There are conventions where people have mapped their sexual attraction to large stuffed animals. So again, I'm using these examples as a way just to understand that when that starts to happen, you no longer get sexually aroused by a sexual experience, like a real sex experience with another human being. So what happens is again, through that aspect of it, you start to literally not be aroused by people. You're aroused by. So I started to experience that. And while I was,
what was that experience when you say you started to experience that? Can you tell us about that experience? Tell us a story about that experience. Is that you was with a girl and you realized, give us an example of that.
Yeah. I mean, being with women and, starting to do, being with them, being intimate with them, getting naked, and then literally thinking in my mind that my, penis is not getting an erection right now. And then starting to make it worse by being afraid that I'm not going to. So then it creates performance anxiety on top of that. So this is all psychological. It's not an actual physical thing. It's psychologically what I'm doing. My body responds to what I tell it to do, right? And we can see this in other examples as well. Like your body responds to tell it to get out of bed, right? So whatever my mind does, is the body's going to respond to it.
How did you combat that? How did you overcome that? That's tough for a man, dude. I mean, just as a man to man, for a man experience, that's a challenge. Yeah, how does a man overcome that? So if there's a man listening and he's like, oh shit, I'm going through that. I know what that's like. How do you overcome that?
Well, the simple answer is stop watching porn. The more complex answer is going through the process of 1, stopping watching porn, 2, starting to do the mental and inner work to understand why you watch porn, 3, then starting to bring awareness to the choices that you're making, and then giving it time so that your body can reset to its natural state. So when I went through my healing process to fast forward a little bit, I went 120 days, no jacking off, no sex, no porn, no nothing. And then through that process, literally rewired my body to reset back to its natural state to be attracted and sexually aroused by physical touch and a woman. So this isn't undoable because I've done it for myself, but it takes time and it takes commitment, and it takes a level of will that most people don't have when you're in the middle of addiction. And that willpower, right, is the source of creation in this way.
Brother, I got so many questions. I'm really enjoying this conversation with you because I just got so many questions for you. So I want to pace myself here because, okay, so man to man, we're men biologically, and God made us a certain way. I'll share the story with you. So I have 4 kids. They're all 2 years apart. My oldest is 27 today. And when my kids, I have 3 boys and 1 girl, right? And I remember one day vividly, we were having dinner. It was the whole family, me and my wife, the 4 kids were having dinner. And so I started busting my boys' chops, right? My 2 oldest. Christopher was like 16 maybe. And boys, I'm going to embarrass you. This is just the way it is for young men. You boy, we all go through this, right? Ladies, if you're listening and your husband's done this, all right, just maybe you'll relate to this. So we're sitting at the table one day, right? And we got into a discussion. I remember I used to call my sons, my 2 oldest sons, Google and Bing, because they knew it all, right? When kids are teenagers, you can't tell them shit. They know everything. I know. Everything is I know, right? So Google and Bing, we're having dinner, and I'm teasing them. Google, what's up? And Bing, what's up? Right? I'm messing around with them. And then I start to tell them, like, hey, dude, why are you in the bathroom for 30, 40 minutes and the whole water heater? No one can take a shower after you. Like, I know what they're doing in there, right? Like, I was 14 once. They're like, oh, I like the hot water. I was like, bullshit. I know what you're doing, right? Right? And I started making jokes about it. And then I started calling one master and the other one beta. And my wife got so pissed off, dude. My wife, I was just being a dude, just being a dad, right? Just my wife got so, I was like, babe, listen, I was 14 once. I was 15 once. And you have this sexual energy as a young man. And back in my day, it was magazine. We didn't have internet, right? It was Victoria's Secret stuff that my mom used to get. It was magazines. So it's just the rite of passage, but it's now so easy with, like you said, with the internet, that it's easy for young men. So my question is, we as men have this kind of, I don't know, a man that hasn't, you did it, you just stood there for 15 years, right? That haven't gone through that. Like when we have real talk as men, we can all admit, hey, we've been there, right? Like as a teenager, we did this. This is kind of like, shit, I remember with my boys coming home from school, like, hey man, I'm gonna go in the bathroom, you go over there. And it was like, dude, it was like a thing, right? Like, it was weird. It was just teenage boys doing dumb shit, right? Just trying to express their sexual desire. And it was like, hey, we would take turns with that. Let me your magazine. And it was just stuff like that. How do we now differentiate from that line of, right, being a 14-year-old boy going through that experience, right, in that stage in your life, to it not becoming an addiction, right, or staying there, like, because that's a natural process.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, studies didn't come out to about 2008 to 2009 that showed that video pornography, specifically, has the capability to reprogram your body 10 times faster than still imagery. So if you consider this, when you're looking at a picture, there's nothing that's really happening in that picture. Your visual processing of the brain is limited. When you're watching a scene, the visual processing of the brain is at 10 times the amount, which means that creates a larger intensity of attraction to want to go back and watch that scene. Now go ahead and put out that if you are addicted to porn, you're most likely opening, as I did, multiple tabs because I liked multiple different scenes. And now I'm just flipping back and forth between different scenes until I find the right one that I would like to orgasm to. So now we're talking about multiplying that by, let's say, another 10x while I'm having 10 different things on there. And now we're creating this just smorgasbord of stimulation and dopamine and attraction and desire to, again, things that aren't real. It's like jacking off to a movie, man. Like, it really is. you think about it this way, what am I doing? If I look at bird's eye view, what am I doing? I'm jacking off to a computer.
Mm.
And then the second thing, man, is that it is sexual shame that prolongs sexual deviance. So I want you to think about this in this way. When we talk about, I'll ask this first: are you open to a reflection about how you address your boys?
Yeah, absolutely. I know I screwed that up. I'm just being authentic, and the way I was just being, back then I didn't know what I know today.
I just want you to know, like, it's just an opportunity, and it's an opportunity that I can show you how deep this sexual shaming goes. When you did what you did, I imagine the intention was to bring forward a conversation, but their response to that was that they're embarrassed. Embarrassment is shame. It's the same thing. And when somebody is embarrassed, if you've ever been embarrassed about something, we don't necessarily want to talk about those things. Matter of fact, hiding is a symptom of shame. I've never met somebody that hides something they're proud of. Typically, what we keep in the dark is shame, right? We're shameful about it.
Just to be clear, though, I it wasn't more I was partly teasing them, being a dad, right? Just messing with them, teasing them. But I was also letting them know. It was more so of like, hey, this is normal. Like, I've done this. Like, I know you're doing this because I've done it, right? And it was more of a light. It wasn't. My wife got it because women we're going back 15 years ago almost, right? She got it because she was more emotionally in tune, and my women tend to be have a higher EQ than men. So not to make excuses, but those were my intentions at that time, was more so, I'm going to tease you about it because I've been there. And at that point, to me, it was like, hey, this is not a big deal. It's normal.
And I understand that, brother. So I'm not here to guilt or shame you through the process. I just want to give you an observation of what has occurred, right? Mm-hmm. So how they take it is how they take it. It's not actually your responsibility. It's their responsibility to take their interpretation of what that is. But this most likely comes from the environmental conditioning of sexual shame. Mm-hmm. So here's a way that we actually have continually shamed sex. When I was a young boy, I was walking around naked. I was like 4 or 5. Remember this. Mm-hmm. My mom's like, why are you naked? Go put on clothes. My dad's like, nobody needs to see your pee-pee. Okay. In that moment as a child, now I've been taught that it's not okay to be naked. So once I actually wanted to be naked in front of a girl, I had resistance to it. And it came back from that moment in which I was told that it's bad to be naked. Mm-hmm. The other part of it is my dad couldn't even call it the anatomical name, which is the penis. Mm-hmm. We're so uncomfortable talking about sex because of our own shame that we come up with names like dick or pee-pee, or for women, the P word, I'm not going to say it, right? Mm-hmm. But all these different things that it is the vagina, it's a penis. Mm-hmm. But we've gotten so far away from doing that. And that's the beginning of this. This is conditioned culturally over time, and we're not actually aware of what's happening. So what does that do? It makes me ashamed of my body. So now if I'm going to do something sexual with my body, like masturbate, and then my father is going to come to me and basically call me out and tell me this without explaining to me or talking to me, and actually coming from a place of empathy that says, hey, son, I've been there. I've done exactly what you've done before. I want to let you know that. And I also want to let you know that I'd love to have an open conversation about this, because there are some potential dangers of this if you continue to do that. Are you open to talking about that? It's just a different form of delivery. It's not that the intention was ill. It's just a different form of delivery to move through the embarrassment. And the first way to move through shame for somebody else is to tell them that you've had the experience as well, right? So what is most personal is most universal, which is why I share my story. Mm-hmm. The more I share my story, the more people come. And I see people like, and this isn't a judgment, this is just an observation. I see people like Sandra Guru and some of these like gurus talking about porn addiction. Bro, you've never been in the middle of it. Like, really, you shouldn't be talking about this, because your simple solutions are things that guys say, you have no idea what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. So until we make the connection through vulnerability of knowing what somebody is going through and sharing our story, that gives them the end to start talking about it. And that's the first level to heal. The reason why I perpetuated the pattern so long is because I hid it, because I was shameful about it. Because as long as nobody else knows about my dirty secret, I can continue to act like I am. But what does that do? It perpetuates the dirty secret to continue to happen. And so addiction ensues, right?
So how did you break through it? How did you break through it, brother?
Well, first, I wish I could say that I had enough courage to come out with it by myself, but that's not true. For me, I was with my wife at the time. We had gotten married, so a little bit of a fast forward from college. And she had found porn like randomly, and I was still denying it. And then finally, we were leaving the gym one day, and this is a two-part story. So we used to have a business together, a fitness business together. We were leaving the gym, and she grabbed my hand and she said, "We need to talk." Anybody that's been in a relationship that hears those 4 words knows that there's some sort of seriousness to afterwards. And for me, I almost had an anxiety attack because I knew what you want to talk about. So we get into my truck, and she says, "Let me see your phone." And I reluctantly give it to her. And this was 2016. And again, I have people refute this, but I'm just letting you know this was my experience. In 2016, if you went to in-private browsing on an Android, even though you're in private browsing, it'll still save the searches when you hit the drop down. So she goes to my in-private browsing, she hits the drop down, and about 5 searches of things that I would never want her to know that I watch show up. And she says, "What is this?" I said, "I don't know. Wasn't me." She said, "This is your phone. Who else could it be?" I said, "I don't know. Somebody hacked my phone. It wasn't me." So in the midst of my denial, another voice starts to awaken inside me, coming from my heart, and starts yelling, "Tell her the truth. Tell her the truth." Third time she asked, "All right, look, if you don't tell me right now, the truth right now, I'm going to leave you." And I said, third time, it wasn't me. But then as I start break down crying, I said, "But I did watch that." So this was the first time that I got associated with the awareness that I had essentially 2 parts of myself. I had been so lost in my mind, in my conditioning, and my ego to not be aware that there was another voice inside of me, this inner voice that was coming from within. So as I'm leaving this experience, I'm driving home, and this is the first time I seriously considered committing suicide. There was a sporting goods store that was closed. I could have easily grabbed a gun. I thought about driving my truck into a pole. All sorts of things were going through my mind. And then this voice spoke again. And it said, "Who's listening? Who's listening if you're the one that's speaking and you're the one that's talking? Who's the ones that's listening to these voices?" And that question had me curious and actually took me out of this suicidal state. And I continued. And it kind of sparked some motivation for me. 4 weeks later, she comes home and she doesn't want to talk, having a bad day. And I started going to therapy, and I actually started like the first 30 days of doing nothing. So again, the reset is no porn, no masturbation, no sex, no nothing. And I said, "What's wrong? You want to talk about it?" And she didn't. So at the time, I was in communication style anxious attachment, and she's anxious avoidant. Essentially, anxious attachment is, I need to talk about it right now. If I don't talk about it right now, I'm not okay. And anxious avoidant is, I don't want to talk about it right now. We'll talk about it when I want to talk about it. So I kept pushing and I kept pushing emotionally and verbally to the point where she went and locked herself in the closet. And I'm sitting on the other side of the closet door crying. I'm just saying, "Don't leave me. Don't leave me. I'm working on it." And then all of a sudden she swings open the door and she screams, "I want to die." And she runs for the kitchen, presumably to grab a knife. And as I see this happening, I jump up and I get into the door frame and I look at her and I'm crying. And I say, "Please don't do this. Please don't do this. I'll go." Now, in this moment, it was like every single choice that I had made up to that point was flashing in front of my eyes as if I was watching a movie of my life. And after the energy of that situation dissipated, I sat down on my couch and the voice spoke to me again. And it said, "Who's watching? If you are living your life, how are you watching your movie of your life as if you're the character, not the director?" So those 2 questions, who's watching and who's listening, became strong motivators for me and my own curiosity to understand my inner world and who I was. The first place I went was science. I wanted to know biologically and with my biochemistry what had happened to myself during addiction. I learned about epigenetics. I learned about subconscious remapping. I learned about neuroplasticity, neurochemistry. I went through the whole thing. And that gave me a certain level of understanding to know what happened. But I still felt like something was missing in this unsubstantial reality of science, which it is unsubstantial because it's always being disproven or proven wrong, for a substantial reality. And that drove me back into a relationship with God and what I call consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
or a relationship with God. Now, I was raised Roman Catholic. Once I got into college, I was more agnostic. Once I was in the depth of my addiction, I was atheist. And then I actually rediscovered a relationship with God and learned more about consciousness to understand this voice and to understand my inner world and to understand how to really transform who I was from the internal to the external. So that's just giving you an idea, and I can definitely go through strategies and everything else, but that's kind of an overview of those experiences that were most impactful for me.
I want to share something with you. Thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for sharing that, such a vulnerable part of your journey, and I really appreciate that. I want to share some stats with you, because let me share. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to just read it. I'm going to read it for those that are just listening. And this stat is from a company called FHE Health and their behavioral addiction company. And they talk about pornography. And here's some stats. Stats on porn, right? 90% of children ages 8 to 16 have viewed porn. The largest consumer of pornography are 12 to 17-year-old boys. 70% of men ages 18 to 34 visit a porn site in a typical month. And 1 in 6 women struggle with porn addiction. This one surprised me here. My friend, this one really surprised me here. But the one that I had the biggest shocker one was this next one, not this one. It says 25% of search engine requests are from porn. This one here, 50% of pastors regularly look at porn. That one really struck me, right? That one really hit me. I remember being a member of a church years ago and us having a men's group, right? And this was one of the regular topics we would talk about. And we had an experience, my wife had a negative experience with the pastor of that church. And as a man, sometimes we don't see things, right? And my wife, I don't want to get into her experience, but she had a negative experience around this topic with this particular person. And she kind of categorized them in the creep version. We actually stopped going to that church, right? But this one really shocked me with the 50% of pastors regularly looking at porn. What's your thought on that? What's your, you being a man of God, what are your thoughts on that, on this stats? And the one for the women, man, I didn't think, honestly, as a dude, right, as a man, we talk as men, right? Like, hey, especially growing up, when you're immature young man and the way you look at women and things like that, and the society we grew up in. But man, that one shocked me. The 1 in 6 women are watching porn or addicted to porn, and then 50% of pastors are watching porn. What are your thoughts on that? What is your experience with women addicted to porn and pastors?
Well, so I'm going to speak from my personal bias belief with God, which is very different from most Christian religions. To me, God is love. God is unconditional love. God is the observer. If God is omniscient, omnipresent, all-knowing, all-powerful, all good, especially the omnipresent, if God is everywhere at the same time, then wouldn't it stand to reason that you're God? Wouldn't it stand to reason that I am as well? Wouldn't it stand to reason that the tree is? So I come from a different perspective on God. And I also come from a different perspective on Jesus. I believe Jesus was Christ. I also believe that the access of the Christ is within every single one of us. And if you were to go back and read the New Testament and read it from that perspective and see what he's saying, that's what he's saying. He said, have I not said that ye are gods? Have I not said that all this you will do and more? So if you come from this space and you look at it, the issue that I have with most Christian religions is that they put Jesus on a pedestal of being the only Christ, the only way that God can experience itself on earth. And through that, you can try to be like Jesus, but trying equals failure. So we fail and we feel unworthy and undeserving of God's love. That, to me, is not God. That is a belief in God. That is the belief that most people hold. And that in itself is shame. So if God is love and you feel unworthy of God's love, that means you feel shameful. When if God was talking to God's self, and what I mean by this, if I was talking to you as God and me as God together, then I see you as love. I see myself as love. And I do my best to show up every single day aligned with love and integrity and honesty and compassion and grace. And I didn't do that when I was in a religion. I found that within myself. So God's grace, from my estimation, is a stance that you can do whatever you want to do on this planet, and I love you anyways. Where there's a idea of God's wrath. I don't believe God's wrath exists. I haven't experienced God's wrath. I experienced my own choices that created a suffering of hell on earth. And I've also experienced my own choices that's created love and joy and abundance and expansion on earth. So the reason why I went there is that religions create sexual shame. A sin, just by defining a sin, which is really an experience in which has an unfavorable outcome for you, has an emotional response of guilt and shame. If I sin, I'm guilty. If I do a bad thing, I must be a bad person. I must be unworthy. If you have sex before marriage, it's a sin. If you masturbate, it's a sin. If you watch porn, it's a sin. If you fornicate in public, it's a sin. If you were to be naked in public, it's a sin. Adam and Eve. All of that, to me, is not real. To me, that's the same difference between Republicans and Democrats. You guys have different beliefs, and your beliefs you believe to be so right that you will create suffering in this world for other people. So this is where I'm going with this, because ultimately a lot of men that I work with are Christian. And I don't go in there to challenge their beliefs and tell them not to believe in God and in Christ. I go in there and tell them that you have to take 100% responsibility for your choices and be open to the possibility that you're God experiencing yourself as you. That's oneness. That's holiness. That's the connection of what is true. So if you limit something and you shame something to the point where, like pastors, where they hide it and they can't talk about it, because if they talk about it, what are they now? A sinful person that can't lead a church. And that's that perfectionist mindset that puts everybody off. So I know I traced in a lot of places, but I just want to start there that this sexual shame is conditioned by society. It's conditioned by society that's controlled by religion, by government. And through this aspect of being, we no longer are connected. And look at the results. Again, people can refute me right now. Look at the results.
I got to ask you this, Zach, right? Like,
yeah.
if I'm holding you to a standard, if I'm saying, hey, dude, you can't steal. Stealing is bad. And when no one's looking, I'm stealing, and then you find out that I'm stealing.
Sure.
Right? I lose my credibility. So when we talk about pastors, right, when we just talk about specifically that occupation, right, men of God, and you get on the pulpit on Sundays, or you are telling men, hey, pornography is bad, or this is bad, or this, everything you said.
Yeah.
And then you're not holding to the standard. You lose credibility. That's just period in the story. And that's not saying that we don't love them. That's not saying that we don't listen. I'm not perfect. I've done my share of dumb shit. I've done my share of things that I'm not proud of in my life. This is not me throwing stones. This is just me being logical, right? Like from a human experience, like, hey man, if you cannot throw stones if you live in a glass house. Like, hey, if I'm gonna hold my team to a standard, I'm gonna go business now. If I'm holding my team to a standard, man, I better live it, because they're not gonna respect me if I don't live by what I preach. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So how do we overcome that? The question I guess for you is, how do we overcome that when, we live where that particular occupation is about this is bad, that's bad, this is sinful, that. How do we overcome that?
Stop that altogether. Stop telling people that things are sinful and bad and wrong, and allow them to make their own choices and find out what it is. So here's a couple of things to think about, Martin.
Mm-hmm.
We all live in the same glass house.
We all do. Yes, we do, sir. Yes, we do.
Have you stolen something before?
Absolutely.
Would you consider yourself a thief?
Not necessarily, but I am, but I have.
Well, again, you don't. That's the difference. Is people get identified with experiences, and they identify themselves based off some of the worst experiences, and that's what makes them feel like a bad person, without actually having the duality of understanding that without the darkness there is no light, without the light there is no darkness. How could I know what I am if I don't know what I'm not? How could I know that? Like, here's a brief thing. How would I know what happiness is without knowing what sadness is? I wouldn't. How could I know what black is without white? I can't.
So let me ask you a question. If you're a pastor of a church and you're leading, 1,000 people, let's say, right, in a church, and you're preaching the word of God and you're teaching, and you have a porn addiction, because they exist. Obviously, the stats tell us that they exist. How would you recommend navigating that? How would you lead that church? If there's a pastor listening to us, how would you recommend him leading that? You come out to the, and say, hey, they come out of the closet, I have this addiction, to your whole flock. Do you go get therapy? How do you suggest you navigate that? How do you suggest that they navigate that? How do we help that man? How do we help that guy?
Yeah. I would, again, take away from the title, this is a human being who's suffering. Mm-hmm. No matter what pedestal.
That's right. I respect that. I respect that, man, because we're all human. We're just humans. Yeah, all of us.
So ultimately, the same pathway to healing is his, that is mine, that is yours.
Yep.
Acceptance, understanding, forgiveness. No longer hiding, no longer denying, no longer lying, and coming forth and being aligned with the characteristics of the Christ. This is what I mean when I said earlier, when we look at Jesus, and again, I love Jesus. If you want to call me a Christian, I can call myself a Christian. But my Christian belief is that we all are. Mm-hmm. And inside of that, if I were to look at the man and how he showed up, honesty, integrity, grace, unconditional love, forgiveness, even a little bit of anger as he goes in and he tips over tables and he calls others hypocrites. Does that make Jesus not godlike? So when we're angry, is that not godlike? Or should we shame ourselves for being angry when the one that we say, at least in the sense of Christianity, the one that we look up to also displayed anger? Is that not the shadow to the light? So these are just things that we have missed. And we're missing this aspect of being like Christ rather than believing in Christ. And those two things create the separation and the difference between how we show up every single day. So what would I say to that man? I would say to that man, have courage, be open. Your transparency and your vulnerability gives the opportunity for your fellow humans that are also suffering to heal. And if you're a man of God, and you would like for others to heal, is that not the pathway to it? So I can't say anything more because I haven't put myself in that situation. Man is no different from me.
I love that. I love that you said that. I'm 45 years old, and I've experienced some difficult times in my life where it has felt like the world has turned on me, and that my world has come upside down because of mistakes that I've made. And I can tell you that in that time, the most important thing for a fellow human being to do for you is to have grace for you and compassion for you. If you're truly wanting to make it better moving forward, then it's not bullshit. If you're truly like, damn, I really fucked up. I really screwed my life up. I really screwed this up. And you're really truly in repentance and you really want to learn from it, is that you never really know someone's heart, Zach. You never really know. You can sense it and you can feel it in their behavior and their actions over time. But I respect that. I respect that you said that. I totally agree and align with you on that, that we need to have compassion for one another. And if a man comes forth, regardless of his whatever, just remember, like you said, we all live in a glass house. None of us are perfect. We're all going to fall short eventually in one area or something. We're going to screw it up somehow. So show that compassion to the other human being that you would want to see in you.
And that's what they get from me. I mean, when I open up with coaching with anybody, the first thing I say to them, I was like, you can tell me the most heinous things in the world. I'm going to tell you that I love you no matter what. Right? So that's a safe container for things to be expressed. God's grace is that I love you no matter what. Forgiveness is what God is waiting for us to do. You don't need forgiveness from God. You need to forgive yourself. And I'll say this to anybody that's listening. How often have you asked for forgiveness for God for something that you continually ask for over and over and over and over again because you have not accepted or received it? It's forgiveness of self. Because God has already forgiven you. That's my belief.
There's a powerful message there, man. There's a powerful message in what you just said. Really powerful. It really starts with you forgiving you. When I just shared a moment with you about, I've screwed up. In that particular instance, when I screwed up really bad, I didn't start to heal until I forgave myself and said, okay, until I came to that realization. Like I was looking outside for other people to forgive me because I screwed up and I fell off of this pedestal. And it wasn't until I came to that exact realization that you just said. All right, I screwed up. I'm a man. I done did it. I own it. And now I'm going to make it better. But first and foremost, it's over. I'm not going to keep beating myself up about it. I'm going to just make it better moving forward and just forgive myself.
And the forgiveness is the stopping of the inertia of the behavior, or what Buddhists would call karma, right? If you continue to have the inertia is something that continues to gain speed and intensity over time, which is regret. That's a good form, right? Regret is a good form of inertia. I keep going back to a past experience and I keep looking at it. I keep feeling the same way about it, which is I shoulda, woulda, coulda shown up differently. Until you realize the truth, which is that you shoulda, woulda, coulda not did anything than what you did because it's what you did. And when you can accept that that's what you did, then you can actually start to understand why you did it. And then you can forgive yourself for why you did it. So this strategy and this process is the same way that I take men through healing. And I know that our time's coming.
I love it, which is what I wanted to get right into that is how can people connect with you, Zack? I mean, I'm going to have you back. I'm definitely want to have you back. I got so many more questions and so much more for us to unpack here. And I think this is a topic that is, a lot of men are in the closet about.
Yeah.
Right. Well, a lot of people are in the closet about, and they need this. We need you. Right. Society needs you to help them through this.
Yeah. The first thing that I would tell anybody in that sense is that you need yourself. Like you're abandoning, when men do this, we abandon ourselves.
That's the thing though, brother. It's like, yes, you philosophically can say that. I can say that from here. Yeah, you need yourself. You need to look inside. Fucking easy to say. But dude, when you're in it, it's not that easy. Let's not kid ourselves. It's great. Philosophically great. We need another man. We need another human being to help us, guide us through. Because sometimes you don't see the light when you're in it, right? You just don't. You just don't. You need another voice. And hopefully this is what this podcast has done for you, is that it's empowered you and giving you that voice. And we need men like you to be that voice, because sometimes, we need that, like, hey man, help me, because I don't know how to help myself. Give me a roadmap, because I don't know how to get there. You've been there. Help me get there. Right? Help me get there. And thank you for doing what you do, brother. You're a blessing to the human race, right? For doing what you're doing and helping people. So how can people connect with you? And I'm going to have you come back on here, Zack. How can people connect you? Where can people find you if they wanted to get coaching from you, mentoring from you, and you be that voice to help them get through it and find their way?
Well, first off, it's my honor, brother, and thank you. You can find me on social media at Zack Blakeney. So luckily nobody has my name. So Instagram, TikTok. I'm most active on Instagram. You can also find me on YouTube. I actually have a 10-part YouTube series on my own story about porn addiction and ways to help to heal. You're welcome to DM me, Born Free, on Instagram. I'll know that you're coming from the show. And then lastly, if you want to just go directly to the website, it is www.iambornfree.net/get free today. My company is called Born Free because it's just a way to realize that you were not born an addict. You were born free. And then through that aspect of working with me, you will create your own freedom in your life.
Zack Blakeney, right? Entrepreneur, teacher, healer on IG. Got you, brother. Just followed you. Let's connect there. Guys, you guys heard him here. Make sure you go connect with Zack. If this is you, I hope that this message helped you and that it helps you in becoming the best version of yourself. I hope that this message empowered you and that you learned something and that you got better and that you truly discovered what it truly means to be wealthy AF. And wealthy AF, that's what this podcast is about. It's not just about monetarily, but in all areas of your life, in different areas of your life. Wealth is not just the money you have in your bank account, but for me, assets. This is an asset to have someone like this on your team, right? To help you get through and become a better version of yourself. Zack, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you. And we're going to make sure we have you back on here. It was my pleasure, my honor to have you and you sharing your wisdom, your insights with myself and our listeners here. Thank you, brother.
It's my honor. Thank you, brother.